Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into putting this program together for you, and we appreciate very much you coming out on a weekday to stand up and talk to your representatives, to your senators, to their staff members, who later I'm going to highlight just how important it is to speak to them. But really, you're the ones who are helping this movement make a difference on the Hill, helping us get recognized. Because you show up year after year, we're able to get speakers from Congress to come and talk to us because you're here. So thank you very much for that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the actual process of lobbying. If you refer to your red folders, there's going to be some documents in there that I'm going to point out. And we're going to just kind of roll through them, and then you'll have a nice leisurely lunch during which you can go through them in a little more depth and focus on the areas you want to. But we wanted to give you everything all at once, so you have it all in your folders there. When you go on your meetings on the Hill, we are going to give you a folder to leave behind with that congressional office that has another copy of the issue area papers that you're going to be lobbying on. So that's your copy. Write notes on it. Do whatever you want. That is for you. All right, so lobbying. What is it? It's an attempt to influence decisions made by government officials. This is different from advocating, because which is publicly supporting or opposing an issue. There's a couple ways you can lobby. Today we're doing face-to-face meetings. These by far have the greatest impact, but I don't want to negate the power of sending an email or making a phone call. Because of the modern age, sending a handwritten letter tends to just be a little bit too slow of a process because of the checks that it has to go through before it actually gets to the congressional office. But if there is a bill that's moving particularly slowly, a handwritten letter could still do it. If you are signed up to receive our action alerts, which you absolutely should be, we will send you an email when a particularly egregious bill is making its way through Congress and give you some notes on what you can say to your representative or your senator. And in just 2 or 3 clicks, you can make sure that your voice is heard. You also have the option to edit it and put your own personal touches on it, but it can only take just a few minutes, and it makes a huge impact. With phone calls, I can tell you that the unfortunately, usually interns that are answering the phone have a little check-off list there of how many people call and what bill it's on and what side of the issue are. And every phone call, they put a little hash mark there. So every little hash mark that we can get in our side does have a very serious impact on the decision they make. And as our members of Congress speaking earlier said, being a constituent, they do really care what you think. They work for you, and that's very serious, and they take it very seriously. Constituent lobbying that we're going to be doing today, as I said, it's going to make the biggest impact. But nonprofit lobbying that we do is to represent you and trying to be the experts on the issue so that they can come to us and know that we're going to be sharing your voice with them. So in your red packets there's a lobby visit how-to guide. And this is going to kind of walk you through the steps that we're going to be going through in preparing for a lobby visit. So step 1 is preparation. You want to make sure that you know your facts. Now, this seems pretty basic, but it also means knowing the other side of the argument, being prepared to counter any points that they might bring up, knowing the history of the legislation. For example, ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which seeks to prohibit employment discrimination against the LGBT community, has a very long history of being introduced as far back as I think almost 20 years. And it's gained traction, it's fallen away, it's gained traction. Knowing that and knowing where your representative has stood on that bill really shows that this is an issue that matters to you, that you're engaged, that you're paying attention. And if you are able to do that kind of research before you come, that really helps. And If you are looking to do a visit at another time, or maybe a visit with your state legislators, let us know and we can help you do that background research. Knowing the legislator, knowing their name is always important, but knowing a little bit about them, what's their religious background, sometimes can help. Of course, we have no non-theists currently serving in Congress on the federal level, but you can get some hints from what they list. If they don't list anything, or Quaker, or those kind of things, they probably have a little bit more of an open mind and leaning, and you can discern what you will from that affiliation. Prepare your material. Today we've done that all for you. So have some handouts, maybe a letter that you've written them before, something that you can leave behind because they're always very pressed for time, and they're going to hear your top points, but they're going to refer back to that information later. So it's very handy for them if you have some written material that you can leave behind. The actual process of scheduling the meeting, you want to email or call the office. You can make a phone call if you're on the state level, but on the federal level, you really want to send an email and try to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. So if you're going to be in town a couple days, let them know that. The times you're available, give them a couple of options so you can be as flexible as possible to them, and you're more likely to get a meeting, and more likely to get a meeting with the representative or senator themselves. Make sure to have some key information ready to go, your name, contact information if you're representing a particular organization, if you are a constituent, and if the number or name of that specific bill that you want to talk about. The day of the meeting today, dress just in a business casual. You're a constituent. They don't expect you to be a professional K Street lobbyist. You're a real person, but you want to show them that you respect their office and you respect, yeah, we have a few not so real people over there on K. So you want to show them that you respect their office, you respect their job, and you're taking this very seriously. And anywhere from business casual to full suit just kind of shows them how much this matters and how important this is to you. Be on time. They run a very tight schedule. I recommend being 10 minutes early to meetings if possible, but no more. We do have a lot of meetings set up for you today, and a lot of them are going to be packed pretty closely. They do understand that. They have lobby days for many organizations around here, and they do have people come up to their offices for lobby day visits, and they know you're bobbing around from House to Senate side, from office to office, you're figuring your way out. So it's not going to be as pressing of an issue today, but it's always a good look to be on time for your meetings. Try to have just a pleasant demeanor when you start out. If you go in to a particularly tough office, one you know is going to give you some pushback, coming in with a pleasant demeanor is a good way to just kind of break the ice and let them know that you're there to try to share some mutual information, try to educate, not that you're looking for a fight. Make sure you greet the gatekeeper. The person at the door is the one who makes a lot of decisions about who gets more time, who gets to actually meet the member of Congress should they happen to pass through. They're someone you definitely want to be nice to. Have your information ready to go. If you have a folder like we'll have for you today to present, that's a great way to have it all collected there that you can give to them at the end of the meeting. And if you're going in a large group, sometimes it's helpful to pick a primary speaker. That way you're not talking over each other and it's a little more coordinated. Today we're going to have you meet the different attendees that you're going to be lobbying with during lunch. Most of them are, of course, going to be from your state. And you can get to know them and decide, oh, I think I'll take the lead on this one. Why don't you take the lead on that one? That doesn't mean you can't interject if something comes to mind, but it helps kind of have a united front when you're going into these meetings. And it's important to know who you're meeting with. All that information should be on the one-page handout you got about your meetings today. And when you walk into the office, you can say, hello, I'm here with the Secular Coalition for America's Lobby Day, and I have a 1 p.m. meeting with Miss Jane Doe. Helps them look it up and stay coordinated and stay on schedule. Whenever you can make their lives easier, they like you more. For the actual meeting, open with a thank you. This is all part of the demeanor. Show them that you respect the time constraints, especially on the federal level, and they're going to be open to hearing what you have to say because they realize that you understand what their kind of pressure they're under. It sets a very nice tone. It opens up their ears. Go ahead and introduce the Secular Coalition and any other organization you might be here representing. And I have our mission there for you on the side. If they ask if they're familiar with our terms. Within our community, we have a lot of different identifying terminology we use, and within us, we know what those mean generally, but sometimes the outside world is not as familiar with that. So don't be afraid to ask, or tell them don't be afraid to ask, and I'd love to explain humanist, an atheist, a free thinker, secular, and don't feel the need to have like a real textbook definition. You can say what that means to you, and that's fine to share. Then you launch into the reason I wanted to meet today is to talk about climate change, to talk about school vouchers, to talk about religion and our tax code. Please, please share a personal experience if you have one. You can cite all the stats and figures and talking points in the world, but if you have a story of how one of these issues affected your life or your work or your family, that's going to leave an impression with them like no amount of data or research can. In fact, that's part of the problem, right, is that some of these offices are not paying attention to data and research and scientific information. So that anecdotal story that might not be as powerful elsewhere in a free-thinking community is going to have a lot of impact here. Make sure to ask if they have any questions for you at the end, and thank them again when you go. Leave that good taste in their mouth when you're gone. And always be professional and courteous. Show them that we're a movement that demands respect and deserves respect. After the meeting, you want to make sure to follow up with a thank you note, just a quick email saying thank you for meeting with me. I really appreciate it. We have some sample text of an email that should be in your folders. That'll help you kind of figure out the format of what to send. They will most likely give you a business card during the meeting so you have their contact information and can follow up. You can also follow up if there's any movement on the issue you're lobbying on that you're aware of. Feel free to keep up that relationship, keep in contact with them. Lobbying is really about the relationships you have, and if you become a resource for them, they might turn to you for more info in the future, and we want them to have as much good, correct, accurate information as possible when they're making decisions on bills. So if you can keep up that relationship, please, please do so. All right, now a few just logistical things. How we're actually getting to Capitol Hill. So we have some amazing guides that are going to help walk you guys over in small groups. And in your packet, you do have a map, so we're at the liaison there. Those blue buildings on the top, those are the Senate office buildings. And those red buildings on the bottom are the House office buildings. Very important to note, it's a little damp outside, and it might kind of sprinkle at any given time. You do not have to exit and go outside around to get between these buildings as long as you are on the Senate side or on the House side. They all connect in one way or another. They don't all connect on the same floor because that would be far too simple. So our guides are going to help you figure out exactly where they connect, and they're going to be stationed around the buildings to help point you in the right direction. But as I said, lobby days happen all the time here, and if you see someone with a staff badge, they'd be more than happy to help you get to the next building. We've tried not to schedule meetings too close together if you have to go between the Senate and the House. We do have a lot more meetings this year because we were able to get some really great House meetings with your actual representatives who, because they just have a smaller constituency, are going to be even more focused on what you have to say. It's going to be a little more hoofing across Capitol Hill, but you get a nice view of the Capitol building and the Supreme Court as you walk between the two sides. And hopefully the weather will hold out as it has been thus far. So some of the material that we've prepared for today. In every folder that we're leaving behind with the offices, there's going to be a religiously unaffiliated voter fact sheet. A great way to open up these meetings is just by giving them this data on how the religiously unaffiliated are the fastest growing religious affiliation in the country, that we vote more than almost any other group, and that in not too long from now, we're going to be the majority of the electorate. So they should probably hop on this ship before it sails. You're letting them in on some key information that's going to keep them in their job for the next 20 years. And you can just say to them just like that, you're giving them the inside scoop, here's the data behind it, you're doing them a favor. I'm going to go through the 4 different issues that we're going to be lobbying on today. Not everyone's going to be lobbying on every issue. We did our best to make sure you're talking on the issues that you indicated when you signed up. Again, we do our best because sometimes those staffers on those issues aren't available to meet. But we tried, and hopefully all of these issues are interesting or of concern to you. So our first issue that we have is school vouchers. And in your folder, you should have the lobby sheet. And in the folders we're going to be leaving behind the office, we're also including a story from Politico that just came out a few weeks ago that really blows the lid off how much money is going to teaching creationism in the classroom and just terrible science in the states that have voucher programs. On that lobby sheet, that's where you're really going to find your talking points. So look that over during lunch if you have some voucher meetings, and it'll help you kind of get the language of what you want to say. We do have a very specific ask when it comes to vouchers because there are 2 bills in the Senate and 2 bills in the House, they mirror each other, that want to send $35 billion of federal taxpayer money to vouchers that are going to be available to religious schools. This is the biggest voucher danger bill we've ever seen. This is the most amount of money they've ever tried. And they explicitly put language in the bill that religious schools cannot be discriminated against when handing out these funds. Very, very dangerous bills and very important for those of you who are going to be talking about it today, that you're here to help raise awareness on it. It's not as kind of sexy of an issue, so sometimes it gets washed over a little bit. Yes?
Kelly, I have a question. An important point that he pointed out was the recent Supreme Court ruling. How can we counter that when you have a Supreme Court ruling that says parents are the ones choosing? How any either, yeah, but again, the state Supreme Court.
Well, for any, yeah,
counter that because.
For a lot of our issues, there are recent Supreme Court or any court decisions that are not particularly in our favor. But one of the great things about the way our religious clauses of the Constitution are set up is between the Establishment Clause and the freedom of religion, there's this gray area where lawmakers really get to make the decisions about how close to one side or the other they want to go. And that's the importance of lobbying, is you're trying to sway them closer to the right side for that issue. Yes?
Now, what are those House and Senate numbers?
Yes, the black bold text at the bottom, that is what we call our ask. So when you go on a lobbying visit, you bring information, education, but you do end with a hard ask. So when they say, so what would you like our member of Congress to do? Or even if they don't say it, please prompt them. Say, this is what I would like you to do. Yes.
Another housekeeping thing is, after your meeting, you really want to discuss what just went on, especially if it made you mad. Don't do it inside the building. Wait until you get outside. Don't let anybody overhear you saying anything negative about any member of Congress or any of their staff.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Very, very important. Part of the decorum, demeanor, be professional. Yes. And Brian.
One thing I use when it's been brought up to me about, well, it's their choice to directly answer the question, I point out that many of these voucher programs are being used for public schools that are having problems. So these parents are wanting to get a better education for their children. So rather than funneling dollars in to fix the schools, they're taking the money out of the public school system and getting into the religious institution.
Yeah. One of our big points on the lobby sheet here is, I believe it's over 80% of private schools are religious. And it's just inherently part of what they do to, maybe a softer word than indoctrinate, but to have that iconography around and actually teach religion. And so there's just rare cases where these voucher bills are going to work out in our favor.
It should be noted that Congressman Scott was talking about Pell Grants when he was talking about it's the choice of the parents. And in fact, Pell Grants are post-secondary religion, and both the court decisions and public policy has separated the post-secondary religion education, post-secondary education from pre-college education. And from a public policy and law standpoint, it's very much been on our side that K through 12 shouldn't be, taxpayer money shouldn't be going to K through 12 to religious institutions.
Thank you very much. I'm going to, for now, keep going through the issues, and then we'll open it up on the at the end for general lobbying questions. If you have a question on that specific issue, though, I'd be happy to take it at that point, and Sarah will run a mic up to you so we can hear you loud and clear. So our next issue that we're going to be talking about today is tax reform. So in your folder, you have your lobby sheet and issue statement. You've all seen the numbers of the billions of dollars that are going through churches with no oversight. They're considered charitable organizations without having to prove any charity. They're not asked to give these 990 forms that show exactly where your money is going, like other nonprofits, like members of our coalition. And probably the most egregious is the Church Audit Procedures Act, which gives a practical immunity to churches that are even that have wrongdoing going on from being investigated or prosecuted. They basically have to prove the case before they can investigate the case. Therefore, there have been no prosecutions. Shock. We have a very specific ask here. There's not a bill yet. If you've been following tax reform, which is just another really cutting-edge, sexy issue, they tried in the House. Our comments there were well received and actually included in some recommendations that were sent to the House Ways and Means Committee, who put together the tax reform bill. And so those comments are going to be included in your folder that you leave behind at the office. They are thick on the legalese, but that's what the tax people definitely like. So they'll have fun with that. But that our main talking points when it comes to tax reform is just that the churches get these benefits that nobody else does with no proof required, and how much these exemptions are costing everybody, and how much they're even, this is a really good selling point if you're in a difficult office, how much they're hurting charitable giving. We see a pretty direct correlation between, as these scandals come out, not just even financial scandals, but just the Catholic priest scandals, charitable giving overall just drops, and especially religious giving, which they really care about. So when you talk about the need for just a little bit of oversight, we're not talking about them handing over their books and telling us everything that's going on, but if they're going to get tax exemptions for charitable purposes, making sure that they're doing charitable things, or just at least that they're not doing really terrible, illegal, bad things. Just that little bit. Can't we just get one thing? So those angles tend to work very, very well, and especially when you reiterate, which is on the issue statement, how this does not hurt religious liberty at all, because that's going to be their first jump, their first go-to. And those talking points are going to be on your issue statement that's in your red folder for you to look over during lunch.
Can you give us some specifics of some of the legal or bad criminal activities that are protected?
The nuns.
No, please, if you.
Unwed mothers' homes that have now been investigated.
Can you share with everybody?
Well, there's a recent article, particularly in Ireland. The Catholic Church is in deep trouble right now, especially in Ireland, where they've uncovered mass graves of children from unwed mothers living in these homes. So the Catholic Church is now facing not only problems with pedophile priests, but now murderous nuns.
Yeah.
But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure it's going to be uncovered more here.
Not to pile on the Catholic Church or anything, but $3.3 billion has gone to defending these priests, gone to settlements. I wouldn't necessarily call that a charitable purpose for over $3 billion, but that's the kind of thing that even the people who drop money in the plate should know.
There's also a church in Texas which owns a bunch of airplanes and a huge amount. There's a church in Texas, I'm pretty sure it's in Texas, that owns a bunch of airplanes, and the pastor lives in a gigantic mansion and has all kinds of benefits to him personally, and there is no accounting for how that church spends its money.
There's a few of those. There's a few of those planes. And then,
just an easy example is pastors who preach politics from the pulpit, which is directly in violation of the 501c3 regulations.
Yes, and the best part about that is they are begging to be challenged. They actually videotape themselves doing what's illegal if you're a C3 election activity and mail it to the IRS. They say, here's the evidence, and they still don't do anything about it. So this is really also an enforcement issue, but the IRS's hands are kind of tied because of this legislation.
FFRF is suing
We're going to try to make it even easier for you to win. One last before we go on.
And the parsonage exemption for some clergy who get no property taxes on their properties, and that is under the guise of that is their compensation for basically no income, and they basically get free housing. But a lot of secular charitable employees may also get free housing, but they still have to pay property taxes on that. So that is like an almost completely unconstitutional inequality between people who are religious and people who are secular.
Yeah, particularly for those mega mansions.
Yeah.
All right, scooting on to our next issue is we're going to be talking about the military. So you should have a issue statement on the military. We don't have a specific ask right now because the defense bills, the defense authorization bills just made their way through Congress. But we do want to share with them our concerns, particularly about the chaplaincy. Also in the Leave Behind folder that you're going to get for the offices, there is a story put out by the Atlantic on the recent developments with Jason Heap, but it covers the overall background and picture of a chaplain, their duties, how many members of the armed services are non-religious and non-theistic, and how they're being completely underserved by not having a single chaplain that they can talk to. This is an issue you're going to get some people who right off the bat are going to say that sounds like an oxymoron to have a humanist chaplain. And then you've got your points right here on the issue statement that say exactly why this is not an oxymoron, that service members have, non-theistic service members, non-religious service members have the same needs, the same fears, the same emotions as any religious service member. So if they're missing home, that is not a medical issue that they need to go to a mental health professional for. If they are scared of dying, which if this is our one life, you would probably be a little more than someone who thinks they're going to a better place, they might need a chaplain a little bit more to talk to about that. And there's some serious confidentiality issues. When you speak to a chaplain, it's completely confidential, but that is not the case for all mental health professionals in all branches of the military. That goes on your record, and it's a very strong deterrent, especially to those who want to move up. There's also a much higher percentage of non-religious and non-believers that are in the armed forces. So they really, really need this. They really need someone to talk to. There's also a lot of secular activities that the chaplains do because they are integrated with the units and travel with them. They help decide if you get bereavement leave, if you get to go home. And they might say, well, it's not like you really care about what happens to them anymore anyways, right? So why do you need to go? They control secular meeting space. And we've definitely seen that MAF chapters are denied meeting space because the person who controls it doesn't think they should exist. So this is a very important issue. It's one where we got 150 votes last year in the House on an amendment to try to motivate the Department of Defense to make this happen. And we hope to be able to bring that up again. So we want to really educate on this on both the House and the Senate, because it is an issue that takes a little bit of explanation, a little bit of time, because at first it sounds a little confusing. So every office you talk to today could be an office that's going to really change their mind and vote for this tomorrow. This is something they're just uninformed about, and you can really help to spread some knowledge on this. Yes?
Sorry, in the section here, it says roughly 23%, and later it says nearly a quarter. Where do those statistics come from? Because I can see the staff members asking us, okay, what are your citations? Do you know where those come from?
Yes, excellent skeptic eye. There is a military demographics report that was done that we do sometimes get to the offices. They've all had it from us at least 3 times by now. That shows what the numbers actually are. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a formal process where they actually go through and ask, but it's on your dog tags. And so when you're asked what you put on your dog tags, that's when you decide your affiliation. And even with some of the negative comments that certain service members have received for having atheists, or now they can have humanist on their dog tags in the Army. Woo! Only in the Army, but 1 down, 4 to go. They still have higher numbers, and that report shows 3.6% of service members identify as humanist. So for a humanist chaplain, there's no excuse, because there are much, much smaller demographics that do have representation.
Who issued that report?
The Military Leadership and Diversity Commission. I will double check and make sure I'm getting that name right. Yes, okay. And I'd be happy to print out a copy for anyone who would like to particularly take that report with them. Yes. Be happy to do. Yes.
So I'm just curious, do these amendments and provisions only apply to Department of Defense uniformed services, or is there anything for the Coast Guard, for NOAA, anything of those natures that aren't under the Department of Defense?
Okay. I believe the Coast Guard is under the Department of Defense as one of the 5 branches of
Homeland Security.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. Right now, we're focusing on DOD, but hopefully we'll get some progress there, and then we can start moving it out to these other services. Did I answer it well, Jason?
Kelly's doing. I'm the military guy, so yeah. Kelly is doing a great job. The talking points in here, there are a lot of nuances and a lot of complexity, and she's doing a good job kind of explaining it. But there's more detail there, and I'm going to talk to her at lunch to try to add an ask to this, so you'll have something specifically to request.
Great.
And there are lots of ways to get stuff done, and only one of the ways is Congress, and it happens to be at the top. So it's not because there's not stuff to be done, but she's just doing a great job there. A lot of good info in there.
You're making me blush. All right, our last issue for today is climate change. This is the first time that we have gone out and lobbied on this issue, but it's getting pretty hard for secular activists to ignore, and it's something that we're very impassioned about, and it's something that Congress is almost taunting us every time they quote the Bible or a higher power as a justification for why we should just do nothing. So we have our issue statement and our lobby sheet here for you. The points we're trying to get across are that the science on this is settled, that it's a political debate, it's not a scientific debate, which we seem to be repeating in multiple science area issues. That the recent research has really come to a consensus that humans are having an impact here, and we can't just pretend like this is gonna happen without our influence. And we've got some just choice statements from members of Congress where they have chosen to deny climate change is happening through these biblical citations. So if you want a good chuckle during lunch, please look these over and just see some of the ridiculous things that are said. And the main point we're trying to make is that instead of acting, we're having a completely unnecessary debate. That the consensus has been made, that this is not something where religion should be a factor, that we need to start taking some action. And there's some information at the bottom of your issue statement about the cost of inaction, and that is going to have a big impact on these states that have been affected by extreme weather conditions lately. We don't have a meeting with Senator Rubio's office today, but being from Florida myself, I would tell him that his constituency is going to be underwater in 2050 if he continues to act like this isn't actually happening. We do have a meeting with Senator Cruz's office today, so we can talk about some of the things that are going to be happening in Texas if he continues to act like this isn't happening. And this is just such a pure science area that religion doesn't belong, and as Congresswoman Lofgren was speaking about that earlier, about this shouldn't be a political debate. It's scientifically settled.
I've heard from Republicans, friends, yes, I do have some, that the main perpetrators of climate change, if they accept it, comes from overseas, comes from China and India, and that we in the U.S., it's just a drop in the bucket, what we do. So why should we hurt our economy if it's not going to do much? I was wondering if anyone knows approximately how much of the climate change gases and pollution is actually coming from the U.S. and
I wouldn't actually personally cite statistics. I would say that we constantly talk about how we want to be a global leader in every other issue. We want to be the global military force and on a number of issues. Why would we back off on this one that's going to have the most drastic impact on our youth that are going to have to inherit the planet?
And China is a different planet.
There's actually, it's timely. There's a really cool article online by the Wall Street Journal. It's called The World Cup of Everything Else. And it's got a large number of different things, like if the different countries competing in the World Cup were competing on other things like murder rates and GDP per capita and everything. And one of the things it shows on there is of World Cup participants, the United States has the highest carbon production per capita. So per citizen, and we also are the largest country that we have the largest citizenship of any World Cup participant. So that's a global thing that's going on right now that's on everybody's mind, that we're not only the biggest country, but per person we're the largest carbon producer of anyone in the World Cup.
Thank you very much. And with this issue, we could have loaded down these folders with scientific research and data to back it up for days. You would have had to take a hand truck to the hill with you. But while some of us are scientists, and I do encourage you to share that scientific point of view, this is also an issue that's important to secular activists. We can say, listen to the scientists. We don't have to be the scientist, but say, please find peer-reviewed studies and listen to the real research on this without having every statistic with us at that time. If we do, it's all the better, because then they don't have to search for it. But there's such a vast array of scientific information in this area, it was just technically impossible to get it all into one folder for today.
Since this is the issue, since this is the issue that I will be lobbying in my visits on today, and based on what we heard this morning from some of the members of Congress, there's no specific legislation talked about in here that we can ask them to vote for or against. But it sounds like there are many things happening in which members of Congress, as we heard some quotes about, are, coming down on the total wrong side of this issue. So are there any bills that, even if they aren't directly related to climate change, that we could refer to and say, this is going to have an impact even though it's not specific?
This is kind of in the same vein that we're trying to figure out, what one bill out there is. There's not really a single climate change bill. There's carbon pollution and standards and just a laundry list of different areas that are all coming together to impact this. And instead of picking one bill that we wanted to win, we wanted to say, hey, House and Senate Science Committee, stop fighting this list of bills and start actually talking about them and how we can make them happen.
On the issue of what percentage of greenhouse gases, again, it's not even a necessary point. Let's say we're 0.5%. If, as a country, we put our science and technology behind figuring out solutions, we can sell to everybody else. So whatever our contribution is, let's be part of the solution and increase our economy as a result.
Yes. Very good point. Very, very good point.
Well, I'm kind of a Pollyanna, but I'm thinking that even though somebody does not believe that there is climate change, why wouldn't you respect your planet and be careful in what you do personally?
All right. And then one more, and then we'll wrapping up.
Regarding the argument, well, let's maintain global leadership, I think it's worth pointing out that days after the EPA released their drafts of carbon pollution regulations, China also released their plan. Now, that may have been a sign that our leadership had an effect or not, but perhaps it would be a useful thing to point out.
That's a very good fact to know, and thank you for sharing that with us. I'm putting that one in the bank. All right, so those are our issues for today that we're going to cover. Max. So, our lunches are being set out now, and we have a couple of different sandwich options. I encourage you to let our vegan, vegetarian attendees grab their lunches first. To make sure that we have enough for them, which is tough because sometimes those things can be really delicious. When we're going to call your groups by the order of your first meetings, and again, by the group you're in so that you can meet with people. When you're having lunch, I encourage you to practice, to talk to each other. Just one more minute, guys, and then we're not going to let you all go all at once. We're going to let you go in groups. So I encourage you to practice, to talk to each other, take turns being the staffer and being the constituent. But the most important thing I want to leave you with is to just be yourself, to share what you're passionate about with them and make them re-earn your vote every time.